Thank you all for coming. We all really appreciate it. And hopefully you all will get as much out of this as we will. So as Charles said, my name is Dale Small. I'm an interdisciplinary artist based in Wichita, Kansas. I think that today's program is going to be really exciting, and I think we're going to learn a lot together, as well as hopefully we'll learn some new things too as we get towards the end with our question and answer section. But to get things started, I kind of want to lead in with a quote from Pablo Helguera in his book, Education for Socially Engaged Art. This book is, you might have saw it come up on a slide earlier, but this book was a book given to me by one of my professors while I was working on my undergraduate degree at WSU, Professor Robert Buck. And this book came out of one of our classes where we were working on a socially engaged art piece. And so at that time, I had been working with Armando Minjares and Kylie Brown and a slew of other people on the HORIZONTES project. But he always pulled back this quote. And so the quote is, "My expertise is in knowing not to be an expert." And working in the sphere of public art, I always come back to this. Because whether if I'm working in a community or if I'm working with an issue or something maybe that I'm not very familiar with, or an issue that doesn't affect me personally, I can't be that expert, and I have to listen and trust the people in the community. So as Charles mentioned, I'm an artist, designer, photographer, organizer, writer. I've done a lot of different things over really since 2014, when I kind of got my start in art here in Wichita. And so that start really started with Harvester Arts. I connected with Kate Van Steenhouse and Kristen Beal in about 2015 through a mentor I had at WSU named Lindsay Herkimer DeVries, who was working in the art office at WSU. She connected me with them, and ever since then, that was kind of my start working in the community, doing publicly engaged art. And it all started with this kind of cool looking blue bull mask that we did one year in 2015, a part of the Wichita River Festival. The current artist in residence at that time at Harvest Arts was Wayne White. If you're not familiar, Wayne White is a very well-known artist, most known for his role in creating all of the sets and costumes, as well as acting out some of the puppets in Pee-wee's Playhouse. So that was the first time I had ever met an artist from, not an artist from Kansas, an artist who had some clout, and learned a lot from him. But that moment started a long trend every year. So every year I was involved until 2018 with the parades, helping in some capacity, whether or not it was photography, helping on their website design, or actually helping with creating art pieces with other artists in residence, and the slew of volunteers that Harvester has seen over the past several years. Around that same time, I got connected with the ICT Army of Artists through, at the time, Armando was just my friend and my roommate, but he was like, "Hey, you're an artist and you like to paint. Do you want to help us paint the underpass on Douglas?" And so I had never really painted in outdoors like that in a mural setting, and never held a spray can to do spray paint in a way other than just being a kid screwing around in the driveway or whatever. And so this was my first big moment actually working with medium out in the public sphere, more so than just kind of the performance of a parade or helping with an artistic organization. And around that time as well, everything was kind of happening very fast. So that mural we did in 2015 2015 through Avenue Art Days in September. Turn around to spring 2016, I got connected with arts partners through one of my friends, Alexis Riviere, and we worked with children at Riverfest and one of the pavilions, making art from recyclable materials. So these are a few pieces that are kind of some close-ups of work that some of the kids had made. And this was my first time since being a kid, like volunteering at my school, like working with other people directly on a one-to-one level, helping them create their artistic projects, and helping, make their artistic vision come to life. And very quickly, just that summer of 2016, before the large grain elevator mural ever happened, before any of the other murals that happened with Horizontes, Armando approached me, and he was looking to build a team of people to help on his mural project. It didn't even really have a name yet at that point. And it began what turned into about a 3-year journey until 2019, when after we finished the mural, the grain elevator mural, and the project kind of unfolded. But this really changed a lot for me, and I know it changed a lot for a lot of people in the community. We hired over 20 artists. We commissioned over 20 murals, plus the grain elevator mural. We did a lot of different things through this project, but this project was really integral for me in kind of setting in motion what now has become some of my practice over the past few years now. And if you haven't heard of the project, go check it out. It's amazing. And that's all I can really say about that. But after we finished this project, and we kind of all took our own separate ways and started back in our personal practices, I had been approached by the Wichita Community Foundation to help lead a project of my own design, and kind of help direct the overall voice and message. So to give you some background, outside of my career as an artist, I also have a career in communications and marketing, and graphic design. So this project with the Wichita Community Foundation is kind of a merging of those two things, doing something that is really kind of like a big marketing project, but also a community engaged project. So the Wichita Community Foundation brought me on to help design this kind of temporary pop-up space in downtown Wichita in front of Century 2 to raise awareness about the changes that were going to be happening along the riverfront with Century 2, the now new public library that we have, which is amazing. And really looking forward, getting people to think about being bold and dreaming bigger, and considering, what a massive public space and a potential massive public project could look like. And for me, on a personal level, this project had a lot of successes, failures, hot, long days working 12 hours, some days working as up to 15 hours painting. So being engaged in public art can also be very exhausting and mentally taxing. But this is a project I'm really happy about. And I learned a lot on a very personal level. Learned everything from, how to go about getting a permit to paint out somewhere, to have scaffolding, building all of the budgets myself from scratch, and working with a team and helping lead a team of other people to create this space, which was really fun. This was a project that came shortly after through HUMANKIND Ministries. This project never actually came to fruition. So there are going to be times working in public art where you're going to put a lot of work and time and effort into something for it to never happen. So this would have happened around April of last year, but as we all know, due to COVID, everything kind of changed in the public sphere, and the opportunities that we all had as artists kind of shifted in different ways. And so I never was able to have this project come to life, but this was kind of the final concept of the mural. And if you don't know, Humankind Ministries is a program that works to help advocate for the unhoused community in Wichita. And for me, this was a really special project because when I was younger, I was homeless. So they were really gracious to bring me onto this project, and hopefully finding a way to bridge my experience, but also highlight some of the people that they work with and the work that they do. And so now my work has been for the past 6 months, and I've been very fortunate to be working with Sarah Kephart at Envision Arts, a part of the Envision Arts Foundation. And this has been probably one of the most amazing experiences of work that I've been able to do. As Charles mentioned, Envision Arts is a year-round arts program that's aimed at advocating and providing resources and exploration and discovery for people who are visually impaired, as well as people who are differently abled with different intellectual mobility and neurodivergent abilities. And so for this program, I work as the artist assistant. I work with Sarah as well as another individual named Nicole. And so most of our day-to-day work is just helping students in the art studio. But one of the exciting things that I've been able to do over the past few months is also start to develop some tools and find opportunities for these artists to get their work out into the public sphere. So we'll have currently right now a part of another project that I will talk about here in a moment called A Window into Wichita Arts. Some of our artists, such as the ones in the middle, have their artwork right now along Douglas and Market, which is also near the Chain Link Gallery, which I'll talk about here in a second. But also some of these artists are going to be having some opportunities in the future to display in some galleries around Wichita. And one of our artists already, named Lorenzo, has shown work in the recently opened Mulberry Art Gallery. So as I mentioned, I didn't want to talk too much about myself because I think that, you know, there's a lot going on in Wichita, and I think there's a lot of exciting things that we all can get involved with as artists. If you're an artist looking to get in to making public art or becoming more of a socially engaged artist, I've kind of compiled a few simple things, but one of the biggest tips that I've been given, and one of the biggest tips that I've really worked on, is seeking out those opportunities on my own. That could be as simple as sending an organization a message and being like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I've done. I know you may not be having anything now, any projects happening, but I just wanted to get my name out there. But one of the great tools that the city has actually put together recently is the Public Artist Registry. So this is an online tool that you can submit your artwork, you can submit your resume, your CV, your portfolio, and they will help kind of streamline the process that goes into engaging in like a public art commission. And you'll be a part of the database. So if there's anything, that ever pops up, say you're a sculpture artist or you make murals, those opportunities will pop up. You'll get notified about them, and you'll get contacted, hopefully, if they like your work and they want to work with you. I have registered for this. I haven't had much happen from it yet, but it's also, you know, with COVID and everything, some of these things are kind of on hold. This is a great new gallery that I think would be remiss not to mention in this space. But this is the Mulberry Art Gallery. So the Mulberry Art Gallery is moving into their second month now, which is very exciting. They just had their first show called Let Me Reintroduce Myself featuring a lot of artists across Wichita, mostly artists of color, young artists, disabled artists, and working with this project kind of in the background as it started was really amazing. But around this time, I was also working with Envision, so my work with them was kind of small, but where I can, I do my best to boost their message. So if you're interested, if you're a young artist, if you're wanting to kind of find that space where you can kind of develop your talent, work with mentors, different things like that, please reach out to Anthony Joyner and the team, and even consider applying to the Meet the Challenge program. So this is a program that Anthony founded to work with young artists to develop their skills through a challenge that they have to meet, where Anthony provides you the materials, the equipment, whatever you may need to make your art piece come to life. And then at the end of that event, that artist will have an opportunity to go out and sell their work and to engage with the community, which is really important for younger artists. Another great initiative to focus on is called the Create Work Initiative. This is still ongoing through the Wichita Creatives platform, but this provides a bit of an opportunity and some funding for artists as well as performers and musicians to keep working on their work, even if they may not have been able to gain access to, a commission or a gallery space. The Wichita Creative Fund raised, I believe, over $50,000 this past year just to provide for this program, which is incredible. And in connection with that, as I mentioned earlier, a part of the Wichita Creative Fund is a program that myself, Shannon Boone, Maggie Gilmore, Kyle Solomon, Anthony Joyner, and there's probably one other person I'm missing. It always took a village to make these projects happen. But at the beginning of the summer last summer, we were all kind of talking about, our frustrations as artists, how a lot of us work as freelance artists or freelance designers or creative consultants, and we lost a lot of our income because of COVID. And we were beginning to have even more deeper conversations about, what the landscape of the Wichita art economy is like, who gets access into certain spaces. And we were trying to think of ways to really kind of flip that on its edge and open up a new space for artists to access Wichita in an engaging way. And so this is where a window into Wichita arts kind of formed. So we invite artists of all walks of life, all skill levels. We don't stipulate or discriminate. And the main goal is to get as much art out as possible. Sometimes it's originals, but a lot of times we're making prints, reproductive prints for people so that way they're not having to worry about their art kind of sitting in a window for a few months. But this is a great project. The link is down below if you'd like to apply. We're in our second month, but we have really no end in sight because we've had a lot of people submit. So we're kind of scheduled out for the next 4 months, but there's plenty of room. So please consider. And as I mentioned earlier, Harvester Arts is another great organization to get involved with. Hugo will talk a little bit here in a moment about his role as a Harvest Arts Community Fellow. But a great opportunity happening right now with Harvest Arts is the Chainlink Gallery. I believe they're still have a month out into April 24th for accepting installation proposals to have work featured along the chain link fence. So that's a great opportunity that you should also look into. And Cameraforthecommons, which is what Hugo will be talking about in a moment, is a project we're working on together. It's his brainchild, but this is another great program to get involved with as well. I'm going to end here, but I wanted to thank you all for listening and coming. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Facebook. That's the end URL, or you can search that in the search bar, or you can find me on Instagram at Dale Small, or you can visit me on my website and kind of check out some of the things that I do personally and my own artistic practice in my MFA program, or just some other projects that I've been working on. But yeah, I'll end it here and we'll get started with Hugo. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hugo Zelada-Romero, and let me switch into presentation mode. Thank you, Dale. My slideshow is going to look as great as Dale's does because they are a designer, so they have all the skills when it comes to that. So let me talk to you about a few different projects. I'm going to start off with talking about Harvester Arts, the Community Fellowship. So this on 2020 was the first year that Harvester Arts opened up their fellowship to folks that were doing something that had to do with placemaking or community practice. Before that, it was mainly focused on personal projects that folks were working on, and then having a show and inviting people to participate in that as audience members. And let me start talking to you about the bomb shelter show. So I've been making art in Wichita for over a decade now, and at some point in my youth, I realized that there weren't a lot of opportunities for artists to show their work. So maybe there were a few galleries that were presenting work, and for Final Friday or places like Commerce Street were pretty big. But there wasn't really a place for someone who wasn't an academic or well-connected to show their artwork to the public. So I started a project called the Bomb Shelter Show. And my ethos behind this was sort of like very punk rock. I wanted to have some sort of a space that didn't rely on like a physical storefront or had anything to do with renting out a place or even having something that would be considered a proper gallery. So in the show, I invited all the people that I knew that made work and had them invite their friends. And what happened there was we basically made a one-night show that included all the artwork from different talents in Wichita. So these were young folk, older people, people that were established, and then people that were just sort of hobbyists and were starting out and wanting to put, their paintings out there to show the public what they were doing. So one of our first locations was actually at a old automotive garage on East Kellogg near Woodlawn. So it was pretty much abandoned. There was nothing there. Myself and two partners set up the space. We put hanging implements on the walls. We invited people and just spent the whole day hanging. And eventually at night, we opened it up to the public. And you can see here an image of all the different people that were there. And we pretty much treated it as a salon style show, which means that instead of work being hung side by side and maybe being focused on a single artist, it had everything. The entire wall was covered. There were no titles, so the artists had to be there to talk about their work. And it turned out to be a really spectacular event and show. And this is sort of my first foray into public artwork. So the work wasn't about, this project wasn't about myself or my art in particular. It was a way to create an experience that other people could be a part of. And through this, a lot of friendships were formed, new bands were made. You can see different people who are prominent in Wichita right now. So we have a person named Connor Lang that has a gallery called Spider Gallery, which is also kind of run with the same ethos. And then Luann Glass of a band called Dream Crusher is there. So this was a pretty great experience for me. Since then, I haven't made a lot of bomb shelter shows. The idea behind it was that other people would pick this up, or they would realize that they didn't need gallery representation. They didn't really need to know people in order to have their own art shows. They could pretty much find any sort of space, set it up guerrilla style, invite people through social media, and have an audience that way. This image was taken at Sutton Place, so that's near downtown. We took over the office space and the basement floor, so it was sprawling, and we had over 80 artists represented there, along with musicians playing, and there was a DJ set and also a poetry you're reading. So pretty much anything that could happen in one space in one night happened there. It was actually a pretty big spectacle, and I think a lot of people enjoyed it and got something out of it. So if you would like to check out my current artworks, you can go to HugoZelada-Romero.com. You'll see the projects I've been working on now, and then my Instagram is Photografia Hugo. So feel free to take a follow and keep up with the projects I'm currently working on. And just very quickly, I'll show you some of my own work. I think it's important to have some sort of context as to Cameraforthecommons. So in the work that I make, I'm interested in site and place, and what different locations mean to different people and how we construct meaning out of that. So this was taken from a family photograph. So this is my family in Guatemala. They're in front of a place called La Catedral de Esquipulas. So this is a pretty famous pilgrimage site in Guatemala, and it's typical of the photographs that are taken in front of that place. So someone would set up with a Polaroid camera or an analog camera, and they would take photos of different families visiting. So for me, there was sort of this relationship happening between the state or religion as monoliths that exist for centuries, and then the different families that sort of travel there and disappear or pass away or expand, what have you. And this is another photograph that focuses on site and the importance of placemaking. So this is a Nomar Theater at North Market and 21st Street. This used to be a pretty important gathering place in Wichita. So there was a movie theater there for several decades, from I think the late 70s to the 80s. They showed a lot of art house films and films in Spanish language and just things that you wouldn't normally find in Wichita. And this work was made as a reaction to the HORIZONTES project. So the HORIZONTES project focused on the predominantly Hispanic Northeast side, and also the predominantly African-American Northeast side of town that was divided by the I-35 corridor. So that highway sort of exists as a physical and even psychological divide between those two communities, which was a lot of the impetus behind HORIZONTES, and the giant mural that's there was a way to sort of join those two places back together symbolically. So this work was made as a response to that. And the way I made it was by using a pinhole camera, which I'll tell you what that is. And the two different frames were switched so that they would be split, kind of creating, like emphasizing that divide that exists there already. And currently, you can check out my work and Carlos Palomino's art, our collaboration, at the Chainlink Gallery Fence. This is downtown where the old pop-up park used to be. The work is on plexiglass, and we use a variety of stencils, taping, and spray paint methods to achieve this. There's actually a show happening on April 2nd at Harvester Arts. It's from 6 to 9. And if you'd like to follow our project, look at our prints, see how we actually made these paintings. You can follow Voices of Time on Instagram for more information. All right, so let's talk about the camera obscura. So I'm not going to bore you with a long art history lesson, but we're going to talk a little bit about the science behind this, because I think it's super fascinating. So a camera obscura is relatively simple concept. What you have is some sort of chamber, a dark room is basically what camera obscura means, that has a hole on one side, and it's a small hole also called an aperture. So that allows light to stream through it in a straight line. And because of that, because you're sort of funneling the light, you get a reversed and upside down image on the other side. So this is a pretty ancient discovery. So there was a philosopher in China who first discovered it. Let me see, his name is Mozi, in the 4th century BC. And then after that, Aristotle discovered that light streaming through the leaves of a tree would create an image on the ground. And the way he discovered this is by watching a solar eclipse transition throughout the day. So it's been something that's been known since antiquity, but the first person to really explain how it works was in the 9th century by a philosopher, teacher, inventor. He did everything. He was a real Renaissance man before the Renaissance. His name is Al-Hazan, and he wrote a tome called the Book of Optics. And in that, he describes how light works, why the color changes throughout the day, why the moon looks bigger in the morning or in the evening, just basically everything having to do with sight. And in camera, my interest in photography is really just how light works and, you know, how we can be fooled by images and how images aren't always trustworthy because of that. But also the fact that it's a sort of a scientific process, like it's magic that's happening with it. And really it's just taking some time to understand why those things work that particular way. So Ahazan's contribution to photography was the creation of a screen. So you can see the screen here, and it looks like a mosque that's upside down, and that works pretty much the same way that traditional cameras work now. So you have an aperture, your lens, the light streams through it, and then it hits a sensor, or in this case, a screen, and that is how you get your images. Let's see, so. All right, so I'm gonna play part of this video. It's from the photographer's gallery, and it just shows you it's like a quick primer as to how a camera obscura works, or a pinhole camera, and I'll play maybe like a minute of it before going on to the next slide.
I'm standing in the studio space of the Oranda studio floor, which is the third floor of the photographer's gallery in London, and I'm going to demonstrate the camera obscura. Most of us think of a camera as a device for taking pictures, but camera in Latin actually means room, and camera obscura means darkened room or chamber. It's quite simple to create a camera obscura. If you make a hole or an aperture in the exterior wall of a building or room, light filters through that hole or aperture into the space, and if the space is dark, what you'll see is an upside down and inverted image of the scene outside. Like many publicly accessible camera obscuras, our camera obscura has a lens and a mirror. The mirror sits in a turret and allows us to rotate the scene using a wheel. The earliest mention of a camera obscura is said to be by the...
Okay, so it is Cameraforthecommons. So as an artist, I'm used to making things that go on the wall, installations, always objects. I was getting a little bored of doing that, and I wanted to go back to my roots in bomb shelter of creating events, creating happenings, things that are more about experiences. So Cameraforthecommons was inspired by that sort of ethos of creating socially engaged art and something that was ephemeral. So what I want to do with this project is create these large camera obscura, these rooms in different public places so that people can sit inside of them and watch the time change. So for example, one of the places that really calls to me is the No More Theater, and I'd like to have a camera facing that so that you can sit there with your family, a loved one, a friend, and then watch how it changes throughout the day. It's really about meditation and having sort of a peaceful experience. So social practice, what exactly is that? There are different definitions of it. For me, I'm interested in, of course, in the idea of sort of communal experiences, but also the way I've set up this project is that I work with other artists to create these different structures. So the planning process behind this is made communally. So for example, I have the first workshop involves making your own pinhole camera and just basically learning how that works, how it's made, how you can use common materials, and that pretty much anyone can make one. So that's step one, sort of learning the science behind it and sort of how practical it can be of a little science experiment. Here's an image of the first workshop I had. Here's Dale and Carlos, who are my two collaborators with Cameraforthecommons. And this was our first sort of trial of showing people how to make one on their own and then testing that out. So as most of you know, COVID put a damper on a lot of public gatherings. This was made for the Wichita River Festival. It was shared on social media, and it's these basic instructions on how to make your own camera obscura. So towards the end, you'll see some links that you can follow on Instagram and on Facebook and also the website. And if you'd like to make your own and try it out, please do so and share it with the hashtag Cameraforthecommons. That way I can see the locations that are important to you in the city. Okay, so where is this camera going to be located? This is part of sort of the second part of our project. So after learning how to make these cameras, the next question is, well, where does it go? What is it pointed at and who participates in it, right? So for me, by having an open call for locations and having people share their photographs, I learn more about what people in Wichita are interested in. So for me, it's the Nomar Theater, but maybe for someone else, it might be a childhood home or a park where they met their loved one. I don't know, it could be anything, right? So sourcing these locations is an important part of my social media outreach, and is a way of getting other people engaged in the project. So it's not so much about where I think it should go, but where other people think it should go. And that pretty much involves the audience, the people in Wichita, in the creation of this public project. Usually what happens in public artworks is that somebody makes a presentation or a pitch for their project and it goes to a committee, and then that committee decides which project they want to go for, and it gets stuck in the neighborhood, maybe without little input from that particular neighborhood. Well, this is different than that because the audience is implicated in these choices. So they're the ones that are able to guide where this camera should be pointed at. Okay, and also just this is the kind of clear up any question someone might have, that this camera isn't really about making photographs. It's like you can imagine it as sort of a movie screen, and it's just showing you what's happening outside. And here's a mock-up that Carlos Palomino made of a possible camera. So you can see the historical society building downtown. You can see the aperture, and then the person sort of stumbling across the structure and wondering what's inside of it. And there's a bench that you can sit on. So this is just like a simple representation of what that could possibly look like. And these are some conceptual photographs I made that are a primer of seeing the world askew, or seeing it in a new sort of oblique way. You can probably recognize some of these buildings. There is the, what's that place called? Sorry, I'm forgetting. The Spice Merchant. Here's Nomar, here's a historical building again. And then these are some examples that were taken by one of our volunteers, Veronica Miranda. These are her images of places in Nomar, or in the northeast side. So you'll see there the grain elevator, there is another mural, and then there is North High School. So this is, to me, the most exciting part of the project, is what the camera would look like. So once the participants learn how a camera works and they make their own small handheld one, the next project is figuring out what the shape might be. Maybe it looks like a stuffed animal, maybe it looks like the pineapple from SpongeBob. I don't know, like whatever people happen to come up with is really going to be the best idea. And through that, the artists that are participating and translating those designs will make those into larger cameras. There's an image of a camera obscura on the East Coast. You can see it's sort of shaped like an old school traditional camera, and at the top is where you have your aperture. So part 3 is scaling up. So after we have our design, we make it large size. So this was our first sort of practice run, using some really humble materials, just using cardboard to see what that would look like and how it would feel to be inside one of these structures. The structures will eventually be made out of wood or metal, or some sort of fiberglass construction. Really, the options there are pretty endless. And here's Dale helping me construct our first one, which I think kind of looks like a pineapple. And I've decided to include a few images of camera obscuras in other places in the United States. So this one is on a shipping container. It's painted like a Polaroid and actually functions as a real camera. So you can take an image And using a darkroom that's inside of it, you're able to expose paper and then have a print made out of it. So that's something that we're looking towards as a possibility for our own mobile cameras. And this is another one at Salt Lake City Community College. The entrance is on this side, and this one's made of metal. See, that's like brushed bronze. So it's pretty expensive sculpture. And then here's some examples of other artists that are working with this sort of idea. And these are made inside of rooms, so it looks like somebody's hotel room, although you could pretty much use any sort of location. The emphasis on mine is creating public sculptures, things that can move around the city. That would be temporary installations. So, and because of that, it would be accessible to anybody to check it out. So I thought it was important to include this. The idea of the commons basically means that public space is shared. Like, although there might be, zoning requirements or places that are privately owned, like parking lots or what have you, the emphasis on this is spaces that the public can sort of take over and reclaim for themselves. Nomar is a good example of that. There was a project called the North End Urban Arts Festival that closed down the streets and turned it into a cultural festival. All the things that were happening were important at that area. So they had DJs, people doing graffiti art, and locals selling their products. And if you would like to get involved into this project, the website is cameraforcommons.com. The social media is Camera for Commons, and the Facebook is Camera for the Commons. And I'd like to sort of challenge you to make your own camera and share it with Camera for the Commons so I can see what places are important in your location. The sort of timeline for this project is to have one constructed by the middle of the summer that can be portable. And so please follow our social media and look for opportunities for you to be able to participate in this. And then finally, I thought I would share a book that was really important to me. It's called River of Shadows by Rebecca Solnit. And if you're a photography nerd like I am, she talks about Edward Muybridge, the invention of the film camera and how that sort of shaped our idea of Hollywood, the West, and how technology changed America. And that is it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. I wanted to mention how excited I am about the Camera Obscura program, because I think that honestly there are so many neighborhoods that could be enlivened by this, because so much in our society, it's, how can I say, commerce is welcome on on every part of the street, but not art and culture so much. And I do think we need to open up a space for that. See.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. A lot of the projects that I get involved in are not really focused on like the business side or necessarily like development. They're more about experiences and things that people can enjoy for free.
Amen. There's a story that just came out of Kansas City. A man got excited about the Kansas City Chiefs, for example. He liked art. He painted a mural on the side of his house. It turned out it was against the city code. So he's having actually to remove the side of his house, and someone has stepped forward to purchase it, so I don't know. I would like a city in which, art could be more spontaneous and widespread. I think we all would, I think. And I wanted to thank Dale as well for my mom, who is almost 90. She especially likes the HORIZONTES project. She passes it coming to and from church, every morning, and she always mentions it to me. So yeah, I'm sure she's very appreciative of that. Looking to see if I have any questions. Not thus far, I think.
We are both very informative. So.
Pardon?
I said we were both very informative. So,
Well, absolutely,
but
indeed. And I think I also check admin reference email at the library, and I noticed that we were getting some bounce backs from people who had been sent links, but because we didn't have an accurate email address for them to receive the link. We receive the bounce back in admin and reference email, and you can see that we're not getting through, but you can't see where it came from because we simply don't have an accurate email address to begin with. So it's one of the things, that I'd like to remind, library patrons, that make sure that the library always has an accurate email address for you, so that we can get right back in touch should we need to. I am getting a question. This is, will the Humankind mural be done anytime is the question I'm getting. And I think Dale, you'd indicated that project hadn't ultimately worked out.
Yeah, so Humankind within the past probably 6 months or so has had kind of some organizational changes, as well as a refocusing of the way that they go about using their funding. The winter was really hard. There were a few people who had actually died because of the temperatures. And to give you some indication to that, I also work with an organization called Solidarity Not Charity. We're a mutual aid group. And so we've been kind of, we don't work directly with Humankind, but we are involved each week of working with the unhoused community. So yeah, that mural really does not have any future, which is entirely okay. Sometimes there's kind of always this kind of cross between like social work and being a socially engaged artist. And so some of the work that I do has been over the past 6 months less focused on art and more on kind of working within that capacity of solidarity, not charity, and helping the unhoused community. So if you would like to donate to us, you can find us on Facebook as well. But I hope that answers that question.
Indeed it does. Indeed it does. Thanks, Dale. The next question is about the Camera Obscura project. And it is, could the Camera Obscura process be reversed, right side up or projecting out?
Okay, I'm not sure what you mean about projecting out and about it being reverse. So usually what happens with, if you're wanting to have a right side image, you would need a mirror somehow installed into it to flip it over. So that's usually not something that's done necessarily. And so let me explain a little bit about how cameras work. So anytime you're using a camera, there's always an upside down image that's being projected onto a sensor or a piece of film. So what happens in, I guess, post-processing in the camera technology, it flips it over for you and makes it look correct. And then on film, what happens there is it's also projected onto a little film piece, and it's upside down and right and reversed. So when you enlarge that or scan that, that's the process that flips it over. And also, interestingly enough, the way we see is also upside down and reversed, and our brain software is what makes things make sense and flips it back over for us. So it's kind of amazing to think about it like in a metaphysical sense, that everything that we see is being sort of generated by our brain. So the ways our eyes work are very much like a camera, and because of our wetware, I guess, if you want to call it that, we are able to understand the world. And as for projecting out, there are large format cameras that do project onto a screen, so you're able to see it that way. And since it's not something that's driven by an intense light source, so let's say like a projector that actually can maybe shoot across the street, the light source is actually kind of weak, so it has to be kind of a dark or shady room for you to be able to see an image. So that's an interesting question because of COVID, I was a little hesitant to create these rooms and have people gather inside of them. And my plan B, which I'm still probably implementing, is actually having a screen and then creating some sort of an awning. So the image would go through the pinhole, catch onto the screen, and then it would be like sort of a three-walled room that you could still see what was happening in there. So if that helps answer your question. And as to where we went to school, we both went to Wichita State University.
I noticed that Dale went to the art history program at WSU. That was my minor when I was a university student. I absolutely love that department because you're really just across the aisle from the fine arts people, you know, and there was a lot of interaction that went back and forth, and it was a great major. I imagine it still is. But let's see. I have another question, COVID related. What changes have COVID created to socially engaged art that you think will carry forward or are embracing?
For myself, and this is something that we've worked on in my MFA program. So to give you some insight into the MFA program, it's actually a low residency program, meaning I don't have to go live in New York to participate in the program. And so we've been kind of collectively looking at the ways of how artists can engage with each other through different projects. So we've actually been sending art to each other in the mail and working on a zine, like a small magazine, through sending each other things in the mail. We've also created a few exhibitions that function solely in a digital space. But as far as things and how COVID is affecting the type of process and work that I do here, it's been a lot more difficult because some of the work really is reliant on being together with people in a space. So my work at ENVISION, you know, I have been working with people, but we have done every precaution we can possibly take. And there have even been several instances where some of our students don't come, and even for myself and some of our other educators, where we don't come to work because of not wanting to put anybody at risk. But for the future, I think that, you know, as horrific as all of this has been for so many people, I think that it's really opening up new spaces for all people to think more intentionally about the things that they do, how they do them, why they do them, where they do them, and even at the end of it, like what they actually are doing. And I would say for myself as an artist, it's been difficult to say the least, as well as also working. I don't have like a background in medical healthcare, but from the foundation side of like helping run healthcare organizations, I've worked closely with healthcare organizations. So I've kind of been able to see all of these different sides of, you know, what things could look like in the future, as well as just having a lot of friends and family who live around the country as well as around the world too, getting inspired by other people's projects. There's a project on Instagram right now called the Social Distance Gallery, and they host online gallery events through Instagram, and they'll share people's work. And I think a window into Wichita as a local project is like something really cool because it allows you to go see artwork outside. You can social distance. You're out in the open air, but you're able to interact with artwork. So feels like there's still some little hopeful moments. And the Chain Link Gallery is also a great example of that too.
Amen. Somebody asks about your high school experience as well, both of you. Do you wish to answer?
Well, believe it or not, I was maybe not as much of an agreeable person as I am now. And
guilty as well.
I was actually a bit of a punk kind of kid too, and I got expelled from a high school, but I ended up graduating from Mays High School. So,
well, so did Fran Leibowitz, you know. But
I always forget about Fran.
Yeah, she's remarkable. She's still at it. And you, Hugo, did you want to talk about high school?
Sure. I went to Northwest High School. I guess I enjoyed my time there. I don't think it was until my senior year that I started taking art seriously as sort of a career option. I was always really good at drawing, coming up with ideas on the spot, and you know, I sort of got my start doing a lot of street art. So just like illegally painting places downtown, using stencils. And my first art experience was in high school. I went to a show at a place called the Lee Shiny Gallery. It was behind Spaghetti Works. And I think I was seeing a band called Nowhere Fast or something like that. And I was really stunned. I feel like it's a formative experience of what I was interested in later in life. So I was really stunned because we were in this gallery space. A lot of people were moshing, but we were maybe like a foot away from the walls that had these really like intricately painted landscapes. So there was kind of this weird dissonance between, you know, like youthful, I don't know, playful violence, and then like this really like delicate artwork that like demanded to be looked at. Yeah, so I don't know, I enjoyed Northwest. I had some pretty great instructors that encouraged me to follow my passion and recognize that I was, you know, pretty skilled at just making things.
Amen. Well, we've actually arrived at 11:30 already, much to my surprise. Does anybody have a final question for Hugo and Dale, or are we ready to wrap up?
I have something to say. So to answer Melissa's question, I think some of the changes that have happened, that a lot of things have gone online, and the sort of collaborative work, instead of it maybe necessarily being people getting together to work on the mural or something like that, a lot of things are just being done online. So process work is something that's, I think, has become important, and that just means that you get a set of instructions and you follow it through, and you end up with some sort of an art piece. And I'm gonna post something on the chat. So this is a friend of mine who lives in Chicago. I don't think he's updated the open call for this one, but if you check out his website, I'm sure you can find the email, because it's where all the open calls go to. So there's one currently open. It ends at the end of March, and it's called At a Distance. So what he's asking for is for a very short proposal of an artwork that somebody who is living in Chicago can make. So if you come up with some sort of idea, send it to him, and they'll find other artists that can make it. And if you want to participate in making something that somebody else created, then you can volunteer for that too. So you'll get a set of instructions, you make an artwork document, and then send it to him, and it'll end up in some sort of a gallery space up there. I'm currently working on my own version of like a jungle juice piece. So like so basically that'll involve the other person buying as many different brands of water as they can and throwing that into a cooler together, and then having sort of a tasting of this like mixture of different water brands. And it's I think it's hilarious, and it's also sort of a commentary about, you know, this scarcity of water and the way people are trying to like monopolize it or turn it into something you can invest in as a stock. Water soup, yeah.
Hugo, do you provide a key for Home is Where the Haunt Is? I'm still on the identifying the houses in Home is Where the Haunt Is.
I can send it to you.
I would love that. I would love a key.
Yeah, Charles is talking about something you can find on my website. It's a show that I had at Project Space, which was at State University. I actually want to restage that because I thought it was so much fun, and I don't think enough people in the city got to see it, but there is a particular painting that has all these different haunted houses. And that's just sort of like just thinking about like what is it that makes the house creepy or haunted, like what's the thing that comes to mind. And this is sort of like a typology of, you know, of these different houses that are in horror movies or horror comedies that have, you know, some sort of distinctness and insaneness about them. But yeah, Charles will send you a key to each one.
I totally appreciate it. You know, I think the Brady house should be on the haunted house list.
The
Actually, so-
Brady Bunch house?
yes.
Okay. Is there a haunted episode?
No, not in the least.
Okay.
Not at all. Thank you both of you so much. I truly appreciate it. You've saved our art program this year and you've done a lovely job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dale.
Thanks for everyone who came and joined us today.